It all started with a single seemingly harmless email that landed in the inbox of a Bangladesh bank employee in January 2015, a zipped file disguised as a resume submission. Unbeknownst to the staff, that one click would open the digital floodgates, unleashing malware unlike anything they'd ever seen before. The malicious software quickly spread like wildfire, embedding itself deep within the bank's computer systems, quietly observing and adapting. This wasn't your average virus. It was a tailor-made cyber weapon capable of bypassing security and silently extracting critical information. Over the course of a year, the attackers established encrypted channels within the bank's network, turning the infrastructure into their playground. They didn't rush. Every move was calculated as they watched, learned, and mapped the internal procedures with clinical precision. At the core of the bank's operations was the SWIFT system, a global financial messaging network used by institutions to send secure transfer instructions. The hackers set their sights on this digital backbone, understanding that breaching it would be the key to accessing billions. The SWIFT platform was considered bulletproof by financial institutions around the world, a fortress of encrypted data transactions. But the attackers were unfazed, determined to turn this fortress into their personal treasure vault. However, they faced three formidable hurdles: the automated printer that documented every SWIFT transaction, the need to forge perfect digital identities to fool US authorities, and the lack of massive funds directly in Bangladesh bank accounts. But through SWIFT, the bank held the keys to enormous reserves housed at the US Federal Reserve, a tempting target ripe for exploitation. Instead of brute force, they deployed psychological and strategic warfare, subtly disabling the printer to cloak their movements. Their malware caused it to fail just enough to seem like a normal technical hiccup, diverting suspicion from what was really happening behind the scenes. As they silently embedded themselves into the bank's operations, they also laid the foundation for the extraction plan by setting up multiple international accounts. By May 2015, 5 key accounts were established, 4 in the Philippines and 1 in Sri Lanka, each appearing entirely ordinary at first glance. These accounts were seeded with small deposits to avoid red flags, mere placeholders for a financial heist, unlike any other. They even set up backups across various countries, ensuring that if one route failed, another would succeed. The beauty of their scheme was in its simplicity and stealth, waiting for the right moment while ensuring every safeguard had been neutralized. And by the end of 2015, the digital chessboard was perfectly aligned for the move that would shake the global banking system. On the evening of February 4, 2016, as the last employees left the Bangladesh bank for their weekend, an invisible operation was just beginning to unfold. The hackers logged into the bank's SWIFT interface remotely, fully prepared to initiate the most daring phase of their plan. What made this scheme even more extraordinary was the way the culprits used international time zones as part of their strategy. While it was already the weekend in Bangladesh, offices in New York were just opening for the day. With this advantage, they had a generous window between Thursday night and Sunday morning, where no one at the bank would notice anything suspicious. Meanwhile, the Federal Reserve in the US had a full business day to process the seemingly legitimate requests sent from the compromised SWIFT terminal. The hackers launched 35 separate fund transfer requests, totaling nearly $1 billion to accounts across the globe. Each order looked authentic, signed off with proper credentials, passing the checks of even the most advanced systems. To further boost their odds, they capitalized on a public holiday, Chinese New Year, occurring that coming Monday in the Philippines, which meant the recipient banks would also be closed. This added a crucial delay in detection and response time, ensuring the money had enough time to land safely in the offshore accounts. While the clock ticked in their favor, transactions began moving through the Federal Reserve, which trusted the digital instructions provided by the SWIFT messages. Nearly $951 million was approved for processing before the system flagged a few entries for manual inspection. Among the 35 transfers, 5 managed to push through without delay, slipping under the radar amid the avalanche of activity. A $20 million payment was even routed to an organization in Sri Lanka, setting off a sequence of unanticipated consequences. This specific transaction was halted, not because of any sophisticated cyber defense, but due to a minor spelling error in the recipient's name. That tiny typo in Shalika Foundation raised eyebrows and redirected scrutiny to a request that would otherwise have gone unnoticed. In parallel, a few other orders were flagged due to an unexpected red flag. One of the transfers referenced a vessel previously blacklisted under US sanctions. This coincidence led to human intervention, freezing a total of $870 million before it could leave the vault. Ultimately, $81 million slipped past the filters, successfully landing in the RCBC accounts in the Philippines, accounts created months earlier in quiet preparation. Though not the billion-dollar jackpot they had envisioned, it was still one of the largest unauthorized withdrawals in banking history. With $81 million now secured in accounts under their control, the attackers swiftly moved to erase any trace of their presence. They executed a final malware command that wiped critical system logs, further masking the trail of their audacious theft. When bank staff returned after the weekend, they were met with puzzling technical errors on the SWIFT terminal and an unresponsive transaction printer. Initially dismissed as a typical IT glitch, the full extent of the crisis remained hidden, until 3 urgent messages from the Federal Reserve came into view. The New York Fed was requesting clarification on a series of suspicious transfer instructions it had received days earlier. Panic spread like wildfire across the office as the realization dawned that hundreds of millions might have been siphoned off under their watch. Frantic attempts were made to contact the Federal Reserve, but due to the time zone difference, it was still the weekend in the US. With no one immediately available to respond, the Bangladesh bank team resorted to emails and faxes, desperately trying to freeze any pending transactions. By the time they shut down their servers and launched recovery efforts, much of the damage had already been done. The funds had already traversed through a web of intermediary banks, making the money trail difficult to follow and even harder to reverse. In global banking, funds rarely move directly from sender to receiver. They flow through layers of correspondent institutions acting as middlemen. This complex route turned out to be both a blessing and a curse, offering opportunities to intercept funds but also causing massive confusion. In the chaos, the bank began contacting financial institutions across Asia, Europe, and the US, pleading for help in tracing the vanished money. Still, despite the urgency, most banks required days to investigate and verify claims, precious time the hackers were counting on. Back in New York, further reviews revealed glaring inconsistencies in the transfer patterns. Enormous sums routed to unfamiliar private entities, unusual frequency, and questionable destination accounts. These were not typical banking transactions. They were the fingerprints of fraud. Authorities now knew something unprecedented had occurred, a cybercriminal operation that had infiltrated one of the most secure financial systems in the world. But the trail was already growing cold, and the digital footprints left behind were rapidly fading under layers of obfuscation. Meanwhile, the hackers moved quickly to collect their earnings before global alerts could catch up. The 4 RCBC bank accounts that had received the $81 million were suddenly activated, setting off a new chain of transactions intended to bury the money deeper. From Manila, the funds were split and redirected to various entities, preparing them for the next stage of their evolution, laundering. This was not just about stealing money, it was about making it disappear forever. The bank's IT department, now working around the clock, pieced together what little information they could salvage from the infected systems. But despite their best efforts, most forensic trails led to dead ends or bounced through servers in countries outside their jurisdiction. The scale and speed of the heist shocked every institution involved, from the central bank in Dhaka to federal agencies in Washington. But it was only after following the money to its next destination that investigators would begin to understand just how complex the laundering scheme really was. After successfully extracting $81 million, the thieves now had a new problem: how to clean the stolen funds and escape with them undetected. Their solution: gambling dens masquerading as legitimate entertainment venues. At the time, casinos in the Philippines were largely exempt from strict anti-money laundering regulations, making them a haven for large, untraceable transactions. The hackers funneled $15 million into 2 major casinos, $30 million to Salah and $20 million to Midas, under the cover of high-stakes gaming. They didn't walk in with duffel bags of cash. Instead, they linked the RCBC accounts to casino accounts and quietly transferred the funds. Once inside, the money was converted into chips and used for hours of strategic gambling, just enough to look normal while disguising the real purpose. They requested exclusive access to private gambling rooms known as junkets, where VIP players could wager discreetly. Inside these rooms, the criminals played baccarat, a game notorious for returning most of a player's money, helping them preserve their haul while giving the illusion of fair play. By cycling chips and keeping records vague, they blended seamlessly into the crowd of regular high rollers. After laundering through multiple hands and tables, they exchanged their chips for clean cash and quietly exited the scene. Authorities would later discover that at least $30 million was collected by a Chinese national linked to the laundering network, who then disappeared without a trace. Despite massive investigations, his identity and ultimate destination remain a mystery to this day. The remaining $51 million was divided further and rerouted to different destinations, fragmenting the trail into dozens of untraceable financial threads. What started as a cyber theft had now morphed into an international shell game, impossible to follow without deep cooperation between governments. At every stage, the criminals stayed one step ahead, leveraging legal loopholes, weak oversight, and slow international coordination. As the world scrambled to respond, they were already gone, vanished into the shadows of Macau and beyond. As news of the cyber heist broke, a global wave of disbelief rippled across financial and intelligence communities. It wasn't just the amount stolen, it was the sophistication and scale of the breach that left seasoned experts stunned. Bangladesh Bank, the New York Federal Reserve (RCBC) in the Philippines, and law enforcement agencies were suddenly under pressure to explain how such a coordinated theft had slipped past multiple layers of security. An international investigation kicked off, spanning several continents and involving cybersecurity firms, national intelligence agencies, and banking regulators. Digital forensics teams began reconstructing the attack, analyzing every piece of surviving malware to trace its origin. What they discovered shocked them. The code bore uncanny similarities to past cyber attacks, launched by a notorious group known as the Lazarus Group. This wasn't just a band of rogue hackers, this was a state-backed collective, widely believed to operate under the command of the North Korean government. Suddenly, the Bangladesh Bank heist wasn't merely theft, it was a geopolitical operation disguised as a digital robbery. Sanctions imposed on North Korea in 2013 had strangled its access to the global financial system, making traditional transfers of wealth nearly impossible. This heist then was not only about money, it was a calculated act of economic warfare. The Lazarus Group had been linked to multiple attacks before, including cyber operations targeting banks, cryptocurrency platforms, and even entertainment companies. But the Bangladesh Bank incident marked their most brazen and effective operation to date. Security experts traced elements of the malware to other breaches in Southeast Asia, Eastern Europe, and Latin America, showing a consistent pattern in tools and tactics. The cybercriminals often struck developing nations with growing financial influence but weaker cyber infrastructure, a recurring vulnerability they exploited mercilessly. Forensic analysts also confirmed that the malware used had remote kill capabilities and encrypted communication channels, making it nearly impossible to trace in real time. The attack was custom-built, precisely engineered for the target, and executed with military-grade discipline. Despite efforts to contain the fallout, the implications were clear. International banking was far more vulnerable than anyone had assumed. The notion that central banks and elite financial institutions were impenetrable had been shattered in a matter of days. In response, SWIFT and central banks worldwide scrambled to strengthen cybersecurity protocols, forcing institutions to audit their digital defenses. Financial oversight bodies revised policies, and nations began treating major cyber thefts as acts of cyber terrorism, rather than just financial crimes. Though $81 million was stolen, the long-term cost to the global banking system was far greater, a permanent scar on the illusion of digital invincibility. The Bangladesh Bank heist became a chilling reminder that in the world of cybercrime, even the most fortified systems can be manipulated from halfway across the globe. Despite international investigations, only a fraction of the money was ever recovered, and no one has been definitively held accountable for orchestrating the plot. The suspected perpetrators, believed to be affiliated with the Lazarus Group, remain ghosts in the digital realm, visible only through the traces they left behind. Their operation didn't just rely on advanced coding, it required psychological manipulation, deep planning, and mastery over international banking rules. It was a rare fusion of cyber warfare, economic strategy, and criminal enterprise, pulled off with surgical precision. For banks around the world, the aftermath was a wake-up call to rethink cybersecurity, not just in firewalls but in human behavior, system redundancy, and real-time monitoring. For developing nations, it highlighted the critical need to modernize digital defenses, regardless of the size of their reserves. The Bangladesh Bank heist didn't just make headlines, it changed the rules of the financial game. It redefined how crime could be committed without a single bullet, without a single mask, and without ever stepping foot inside a vault. And while the money was lost, the message was clear. The future of crime is digital, borderless, and terrifyingly efficient. The only question now is who's next? If this story blew your mind, hit that like button to support more mind-bending true crime deep dives.
Got thoughts on who really masterminded this digital robbery? Drop a comment. We're reading every theory.
And don't forget to subscribe and smash the notification bell so you never miss the next unbelievable story. Until next time, stay curious, stay alert, and remember, in the digital world, nothing is ever truly secure.